Hey, everybody, welcome to the Jim Acosta Show. It's Tuesday. You can see on screen there is Steve Schmidt. Always love talking to Steve Schmidt. And, you and I booked this appearance a week ago or so, and it just so happens you are the perfect guest to talk about what we're going to talk about first, in that you were an advisor to Arizona Senator John McCain, presidential candidate John McCain, Maverick John McCain. And you have another Arizona senator in the last 24 hours being referred to as a traitor by Elon Musk. That's where we are right now in America, ladies and gentlemen. You have Elon Musk, the world's richest man, ahead of Doge, talking about slashing things like Social Security. He calls Social Security a Ponzi scheme. He's got his minions running through agencies of the federal government, vacuuming up people's personal data. Well, yesterday, the Washington Post reporting this that Elon Musk called Mark Kelly, senator from Arizona, a decorated Navy pilot and former NASA astronaut, a traitor in a post on X after the senator visited Ukraine and expressed his support for the country in its war with Russia. I mean, I said this the other day, Steve, after Trump gave his speech before a joint session of Congress. I said it the other day when Lindsey Graham, came out and was trashing Zelensky. John McCain would be rolling in his grave over all of this. But to have Elon Musk refer to Senator Kelly, a veteran, an astronaut, as a traitor, um, can we put Elon Musk in a spaceship and launch him into outer space? I mean, your thoughts?
Well, great to be with you, Jim,
Yeah,
and good to see everybody. Let me just say this, that what Elon Musk said does not indict Captain Mark Kelly, U.S. Navy's character. It
correct.
indicts Elon Musk's. And it shows this profound arrogance, a unbridled megalomania, an assertion really of mental illness fused with a malevolent political dogma that is a acute national emergency in a growing global crisis. And so what we saw here is
Yeah,
a venomous strike by a serpent at the leg of a great American.
yeah,
And so Captain Kelly has the right stuff. There's a
correct.
book about this. And this man
Great movie. Yeah,
is an aircraft carrier qualified combat aviator who's flown into harm's way, who stood by his wife's side through a terrible event when she was shot in the head
correct.
by a deranged assassin at a town hall meeting, a man of rectitude and probity. If you are a mother or a father, you want your child to grow up to be Mark Kelly. In
Yes,
this country that was forged by great men and women into the greatest nation in the world, all of those people had to deal with low men and women. And so when Donald Trump attacks John McCain, he attacks all of the POWs. He attacks Admiral Stockdale. He
yes,
attacks the men of the 8th Air Force in the 15th Bomber Group held in German Luftstahlags, doing the
yeah,
most dangerous duty of the Second World War. He repudiates our history, and he poisons our virtues. And the lifeblood of a nation is not wealth, it's not riches, it's valor, it's a
that's right.
commitment to human dignity. And Mark Kelly's life of excellence
Right.
refutes Elon Musk's incandescent bullying and arrogance and bluster through action and deed that makes Elon's words as cheap as his ideology.
Yeah. And, to me, how does Elon Musk have the time, quite frankly, to go after the character of a Mark Kelly when he's so busy blowing up rockets, presiding over a car company whose stock has plummeted in the last couple of weeks, is presiding over this Doge effort that has, almost united the entire country against what he's doing. Um, but on top of that, there's a better question here, and that is, and it ties to Trump. Is there a kind of desperate envy going on here? A sad, pathetic, desperate form of envy. Mark Kelly is twice the man, 5 times the man that Elon Musk will ever be. He's 5 times the man Donald Trump will ever be, and I wonder if that's part of the reason why a Donald Trump went after a John McCain and said, "I like heroes that aren't captured," and that sort of thing. And Elon Musk goes after Mark Kelly when he goes to Ukraine and says, these are the people we must stand behind in the struggle for freedom and the struggle for democracy, and the struggle against tyranny. And there's just something sad about Elon Musk and Donald Trump when it comes to people in uniform.
Well, so I'm gonna divide the question, and let's stay on Elon Musk.
Yeah.
And so I was in Germany 2 weeks ago, and I was
Right.
spending some time in a room and was with a bunch of German parliamentarians, and one of them asked a version of the question that you did, which is why.
Yeah.
And I said maybe it's because he's a Nazi. His grandparents were. They were Canadian Nazis who never had the chance to live in the Reich, so they moved to South Africa. And maybe when he did the Hitler salute, 3 hours after the inaugural 3 times, he was trying to tell you something. And maybe, just maybe,
Yeah.
when you look at the brutalism of his ideology, the rise of his techno-fascism, you can give consideration that he has a meaningful intent to obliterate something sublime and divine, which is the notion that our purpose is the pursuit of happiness.
Yeah.
Elon Musk, in attacking the Polish foreign minister, Radoslaw Sikorski, I think revealed for all of
Yeah.
us how he thinks about all of us.
Yeah.
Because he called him a little man.
Yeah.
Well, from
Tell us about that.
Elon Musk's point of view, we're all little men and women, aren't we? Insignificant. And if you look at his treatment of people who work for us in the government, civil servants,
Yeah.
his approach is that they're insects. And trust me,
Correct.
even if you agree that the government is bloated and that there should be a massive downsizing, there is a respectful way to treat human beings who have spent their careers in a position of service. But
Yeah.
the dogma that Elon Musk is advancing is a dogma of a new tech feudalism. And
Hmm.
so the soft and muddled, benign Silicon Valley tech utopianism of the garage of Hewlett and Packard and kind of the gentle philosophy of Steve Wozniak has turned sinister. And what you see right now is an assertion of control.
Yeah.
These men are going for
They
it in the
are.
moment,
Yeah. That's right.
right now, and they must be stopped. And so there
That's
are
a good point.
two bifurcated things that are happening right now. One, there's an absolute collapse of political opposition in Washington, D.C., with few exceptions
Yeah.
within the Democratic Party under the appeasement wing of the Schumercrats and the sleepiness of Hakeem Jeffries' leadership. And in the country, there is the tip of an uprising. And so there
Yes.
is, as a fruit of that uprising, chaos in the financial markets,
Yes. I've been,
a
yeah,
collapse of the Tesla stock, and
that's
it's
right.
just beginning.
No, and I've been calling what we've been seeing lately the Great American Pushback. I'm very patriotic about what we're seeing right now. I think it's something that should give a lot of people hope for what is taking place when thousands of people pack themselves into Bernie Sanders rallies. It's not just the folks who are showing up at these Republican town halls and giving them a piece of their mind. It's the folks who are just showing up at any town hall. And this is the moment to do that. This is the moment to let your elected leaders know that you are not on board with this bullshit. And I mean, you talk about Elon Musk and the way he looks at people as insects and so on. I mean, the way he's talking about Social Security, Steve, you've been in American politics for a long time. In what way, shape, or form has anybody with the kind of authority that Elon Musk has ever talked about Social Security? I mean, just in the last 24 hours, he has talked about going after Social Security in a way that has prompted the White House to come out and say just today that, oh, no, no, Donald Trump, don't worry, he's all on board with Social Security. He's going to protect your Social Security. He's going to protect your Medicare and Medicaid. I mean, to me, what this speaks to is what you just said a few moments ago. At what point are they ever going to have the opportunity that they have right now? The chance that they have right now. And so yes, you're absolutely right. They are going to go for it. And when Elon Musk talks about Social Security the way that he's talked about it in the last 24 hours with Kudlow or whatever it was, um, I mean, there's the tell right there.
Yeah, I want to
Yeah,
say something, and I'll preface it by saying everything I talk about is through the prism of civil disobedience
yeah,
and peaceful, nonviolent protest.
yep,
So
absolutely.
contact has been made on a line in an assault that was aggressively waged by Trump and Elon Musk. And now, all over America, that assault is in contact with the American people. And the American people are called to rise up against this. So,
Yeah,
our public lands are under attack. If you live in a Western state, we must rise up against that. But there is no point of contact right now from a bricks and mortar perspective that is more important to gather at than every Tesla dealership in this country. They must be blockaded. There must be a constant, absolute application of pressure on this administration until these illegal, unconstitutional, and immoral actions stop, including the threats against Canada, the threats against our allies,
yeah,
and this will not be led by the Schumocrats, who are
yeah,
feckless and incapable. It will be led in communities, bottom up. The courage of one will give courage to others.
yeah.
Go stand outside a Tesla dealership with a sign alone. I promise you, you will not stand alone for long.
Yeah.
Push back on this.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen the bumper stickers that people have put on their Teslas saying, I bought this before I figured out that Elon Musk was crazy. And that's the kind of stuff that you're seeing out there. I do want to pivot a little bit to the economy right now because I mean, I did not foresee us having a financial crisis in the first 100 days of the Trump presidency. But I don't know, maybe we will. It seems like it's going in a bad place. And when you've lost Jim Cramer, you you're in some deep shit. Media reporting that CNBC host Jim Cramer went off on Trump for fueling recession fears and cratering the stock market, noting competitor markets are crushing us, and accusing Trump of potentially, quote, manufacturing, end quote, a recession. Jim Cramer is speculating that Donald Trump is manufacturing a recession. The stock market was down. The Dow Jones was down another 478 points today. Trump, despite all of this, said he's got this plan to double tariffs on steel and aluminum from 25% to 50%. He again referred to Canada as they should become our cherished 51st state, he said on Truth Social. This would make all tariffs and everything else totally disappear. Steve, I want to just throw you that grab bag to see what you wanted to do with it. The 51st state thing to me, I don't know. Maybe it's because I was a correspondent who covered the White House and I tend to chase the bright, shiny object from time to time. But talk about the biggest dipshit idea that has come out of Donald Trump's mouth. It's hard to come up with a top 10. The 51st state thing might be in the top 10 because, I can't imagine the Republicans ever winning the 51st state of Canada in any presidential elections. I mean, obviously, they would be shooting themselves in the crotch from an electoral standpoint. It would be like adding California's total of electoral votes to the jackpot. But I mean, when Jim Cramer is saying that Donald Trump is potentially manufacturing a recession, I mean, I didn't have that on my bingo card for the first 100 days.
All of this is utter madness.
Yeah.
This is, as the senator of the French Republic pointed out,
yeah,
our Nero, guided by the hand behind his back and under his shirt, the ketamine-addicted Nazi puppet master, a phalanx of sycophants, and they're making their move. And he will wreck the American economy. And so there's an urgent matter, an immediate political proposition. Right? What's the purpose of opposition? It's to make you stop. We must impose our will on them, which is to stop the insanity and hold the line until independent courts of law can rule, until the American people can sweep this away in the midterm election,
right,
and then face this in the mirror at the next presidential election. And here's the thing. The Democratic Party, or maybe an independent candidate, will have to go to the American people with a plan to do two things. One, comprehensive, absolute ethics, lobbying, and campaign finance reform across the board to clean it up. And number two, these vast concentrations of power across the American economy, across the agricultural, technology, all of it, the big banks, they must be broken up because they have become a profound threat to our democracy, to our liberty. When we talk about democracy, remember, the South had democracy, it was for slavery. The North had democracy, it was for freedom.
Yeah.
So they must all be broken up, liberty restored, the pendulum rebalanced, but that's for later. For now, this must stop. And let me say something about Canada. This is immoral. And the silence of America's Democratic leaders on this question, who cannot find their way to outrage or coherency on the threats being made and the economic warfare being waged across our closest ally along the longest undefended border in world history, is an act of moral idiocy and appeasement that knows no names. And I want to say something very, very directly about this. Canada is the world's oldest multilingual uh, democratic confederation in world history.
Yeah.
And as Dean
Wonderful
Acheson
country.
said,
Yeah.
as it said, it was present at the creation. At the moment, the most decisive day in world history in 1,000 years, June 6th of 1944, American boys and Canadian boys and British boys and Polish boys and French boys and
Yeah.
the boys of 25 nations stormed the beaches, and they purchased in blood forever
Yeah.
their national dignity and sovereignty and purpose. So Canada is a giant country by landmass, but it is a giant nation in world history because of the achievements of its people in the work of freedom
Well, and the new prime
and
minister,
peacekeeping.
yeah. No, and the new prime minister, Mark Carney, has made it absolutely clear he's just not going to tolerate any of this nonsense from Donald Trump, and nor should he. And it's one of the reasons why he's going to be very popular. It's one of the reasons why Justin Trudeau's popularity shot up there towards the end of his time as prime. And what the point that you're making is absolutely right, because we talk so much about, and you hear, this has been said of America so many times. I'm not the one with the original thought here, but that we, because of our oceans, because of the oceans, that we live in relative peace, and without much of a concern that a foreign nation could do a lot of harm to the United States. But I mean, if we look to the north, another reason why that is because of our great relationship and friendship with our Canadian brothers and sisters there in the Great White North. You're absolutely right about this. But I want to get back to one thing, because you and I, Steve, had this conversation. This was before I don't know if I had started the show yet, or I had just started the show. You gave me a call. We talked about this topic. I want to bring it up now because I do want to bend the conversation back to Elon Musk and the way he went after Mark Kelly, because this has popped in my head. And it's this conversation that you and I are having about what it means to be a man, manhood. And I really felt like we had a connection talking about this, and I'm not holding myself up as like the epitome of this or anything. And I know you're not doing that either. But one of the things that I was raised with was a reverence for people in the uniform. And one of the things that I see in common between Donald Trump and Elon Musk are just two absolute failures when it comes to being a man. And I don't know if I'm saying this in the best possible way, and I don't want to come across as sounding insensitive or slightly misogynistic. I don't mean it in those terms. I just mean it as it just is a foreign language to me to hear somebody like an Elon Musk go after a Mark Kelly like that in that fashion. And and I think about all of these asswipes on social media, these people who have made a cottage industry after attacking, folks like us. And I don't see them as being men. And I don't see Elon Musk as being much of a man. I just don't. I don't, he's got a lot of kids, and I guess he's capable of, you know, reproduction. But it pisses me. This Mark Kelly thing it's just been staying with me. I'm just pissed off about it. And it goes back. It's taking me back to the conversation you and I had about and this is a political problem in this country right now. There are men who are just they're under the trance of Donald Trump because they see what he offers as some kind of example of manhood. And I'm not talking about toxic masculinity or any of those. I'm talking about like the time that you and I grew up in, Steve. And I'm not pining for an old era or anything like that. But there's just something there that maybe I'm not putting my finger on. Maybe you can help me with that. In that, what Elon Musk did to Mark Kelly just hits me at that level. It's just wrong, man to man. It's just wrong.
Well,
Your thoughts?
it's what we would have understood as a low blow by a cheap guy
Yeah.
against a tough guy. And so a low blow is a low blow, and everyone would have understood that. Look, I think your question is a deep question. I guess I would answer it this way, and I'm going to start with a contradiction. First thing I want to say to every MAGA bully, thug, screamer who threatens violence, that's threatened me, right? People that I know, people that I'm friends with. What I want to say is I welcome your hatred. Every one of you sons of bitches.
Yeah.
And I will not back down or compromise or bend my knee or meet you in the middle. We'll stand firm on the line faithfully to the precept of the country that all men are created equal and women endowed by a creator with inalienable rights, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that we have no king, we never will. We are a government of the people, by the people, for the people, and it is the most noble experiment in world history. We are a flawed people, but we are the only nation in the world made up of all the people in the world, where every language is commonly spoken every day, and together we have uplifted humanity like no other combined peoples. We have fed more, cured more, liberated more. It is a record of achievement in the affairs of man, and our shared purpose is to perfect the union. Our country was built by tough men and women who strived and suffered and dreamed and failed. And so I want to just say about being a man, what I tell my son.
Yeah.
Being a man recognizes that toughness and meanness are enemies of one another. That cruelty is not manly. That toughness requires sometimes in your life that you will have to draw a line.
Yeah.
And you will have to stand on that line. And there will be instances when you will be called to not move backwards from that line, no matter how many other people step backwards. That's what I think it means to be a man. There will be times when you will be called to step off of that line and move forward. There will be other times when you will be called to appreciate that you should never have drawn that line in the first place and to say you're sorry. There will be times when you must ask for forgiveness, and there will be times when you must give forgiveness. There will be times that you must show grace to receive grace. And that when you consider your opposition in the spirit of Abraham Lincoln, even after terrible conflict, the wisdom to have malice towards none and charity to all. That is what it means to be a man. A man is judged on their character. And there was an ethos in America that held that if you worked hard for a living, you played by the rules, you contributed, you were entitled to be treated with dignity and respect. And Teddy Roosevelt talked about this at length when he talked about the arrogance of one class pitted against another. And what Elon Musk stands for is the proposition that we are to be serfs in a new age of the tech god who will officiously, constantly, and omnipresently dictate all things everywhere at once. So, if a Russian criminal army invades a democratic nation and it rapes children and it rapes old ladies and it kills them and it ships their children east and disappears them and the world's richest man decrees, I want there to be peace because I want the aggressor to prevail. It must be so because you all are little people and I am a giant, and what came before is no more. I am a god and you are a serf. Hail Trump. And the answer to that is no, sir. Fuck you.
Yeah. And you're right. It goes to who we are as a nation. It goes to what we have deep down in our souls. And I think that is, I read a story, was it the New York Times? I can't remember. Maybe it was the Wall Street Journal that Donald Trump actually helped Volodymyr Zelensky in terms of his standing back in Ukraine because of the way Zelensky stood up to the bully. And, you and I have not spoken. I don't think we've spoken since the Trump Zelensky encounter. But I was just enormously proud of the way the Ukrainian leader held his ground there in the Oval Office and the way he has handled himself throughout all of this and the courage that has just been just constantly on display by the Ukrainian people. And I mean, I'm just reading this morning. There are accounts that the Russian army is maybe not decimated, but it is in a sorry fucking state right now.
It's been destroyed.
It's been
800,000
destroyed.
casualties.
And to think, what is that? Snatching defeat from the jaws of victory. I mean, that expression comes to mind, and it makes me worry that we're bailing out. We're not siding with Putin. We're bailing him out in his most desperate hour. Why not let them fall on their face for what they've done to the Ukrainian people? The way you're absolutely right. We have not talked about that enough as a country. The way they have rounded up children and kidnapped them and took them to Russia, the Ukrainian children. It's absolutely disgraceful. Putin is a war criminal, and how we could side with the war criminal. I mean, that's not just siding with the bad guys. It's a fucking war criminal. The fact that we can side with them, to me, it makes me sick to my stomach as an American. And that is what Mark Kelly was doing when he went over to Ukraine. I've talked to Mark Kelly before. I've talked to Scott Kelly, his brother. I used to interview Scott all the time on my old show, and I used to tell him, when you have the astronaut suit behind you on set, you're going to guarantee you that the producers are going to invite you back on because that's just one of the coolest damn things. I'm also a space nut. The Right
Me
Stuff,
too.
one of the
Yep.
best friggin' movies of
The
all
best.
time.
Yep.
Love that.
Yep. Yep.
Love. I could watch that over and over again. I don't care that it's 4 hours long or whatever the hell it is. And that's Ukraine has the right stuff. Volodymyr Zelensky has the right stuff. Mark Kelly has the right stuff. Have you and I been transported to a different dimension, Steve, where the people who are most admired in our book are the ones who are really under the gun right now, are the ones who are being called the traitor or are being called the dictator? For Zelensky to be called I mean, give me a goddamn break. These are heroes.
They are heroes, and we need to recognize them. The answer to your question is the American people will not tolerate this. The
Yeah,
American
that's right.
people know that the Russians stand for a hideous and barbarous proposition, and that democracy and freedom and liberty, who is defending it? And so this desecration of our values by Trump will not hold. But I just want to
Yeah.
share a story that I think is a
Yeah.
person who's going to be a big figure in American life over the next couple of years, even more so than he is. It's my friend Bishop William Barber. And I think you look at
He's
what
great.
Bishop Barber did, a gathering of clergy and a statement of moral principle in opposition to all of this, attached deeply to the moral foundations of the country. But I was on a call on Friday evening late with Bishop Barber, and he told me this story. And
Yeah.
I'm gonna try to share this story.
I love him.
In,
Yeah.
in, in 1857, the most hideous Supreme Court decision in our nation's history came down, the Dred Scott decision. And Frederick Douglass, born a slave, is a genius, orator, and thinker and writer. And this has hit him, devastated him. And so we look at the man who is the most important African American of the 19th century, right? The preface to King and Obama, a man whose sons fight in the 54th Massachusetts Infantry Regiment at Fort Wagner, South Carolina, a few years later. Like, Frederick Douglass isn't a god, not a
Yeah.
prophet. He's a man. He's an ordinary man. And he's down. And Harriet Tubman sees this. And she says to him, Frederick, who's a very devout man, is God dead? And Frederick Douglass realizes in this instant that he has been guilty of defiling his values, that he's succumbed to what he said was an idolatry, that he put
Yeah.
his faith in men and institutions and not God's plan. And so Frederick Douglass is immediately reinvigorated, and he doesn't have X or Twitter or YouTube. So Frederick Douglass has to prepare an oration, a speech. And
Yeah.
he goes in the first half of that speech and he denounces the evil of this decision. But then in the back half, he says, consideration must be given to the idea that there is a plan in which this decision is a necessitous chain in a link of events that will bring about the downfall of the whole evil institution.
Yeah.
Which, in that moment, in 1857, was stronger than it had ever been in American life. The founders desecrated slavery. They viewed it as an evil that would be dealt with under the umbrella of the institutions that were left for the next generations. But by
Yeah.
1857, it was stronger than ever. And yet,
Yeah.
in 5 years' time, it was vanquished.
Correct.
And so, as we go through these dark days and
Yeah.
troubled times, what you have to have faith in is that a proposition that is shocking in its advancement, that has stunned us all, even those of us who were prepared for it and have warned about it for 10 years,
Yeah.
that as we make contact with it and don't let it go and hold on to it and push it back,
Yeah.
that in the end, this will all be buried back in the ground with some immutable lessons.
Yeah.
I will tell you something, Marco Rubio, the national puta. You signed documents as the son of a Cuban refugee and sentenced 1 million people to death as food aid rots on the shelves. Well, you piously tweet out Bible verses. If you were 40 years old in 1959, you'd be Fidel Castro's shine boy. And he would. He's
Yeah.
abandoned, like all of these people have, what John McCain called the faith of our fathers. And they're trying to raise a new faith.
Yeah.
We must reject it because it is unholy, it is un-American, and it will lead to catastrophe here and around the world.
Yeah. And Steve, I mean, I'm the son of a Cuban refugee. My dad is a Cuban refugee, came over 1962, 3 weeks before the Cuban Missile Crisis, made a new life for himself with my grandmother in the United States. They moved from Miami up to the Washington, D.C. area, and then I came along not too long after that. And one of my guiding, principles in life has always been um, that this country is still the greatest hope on earth, even right now. And I know that may come across as like, yeah, right, Jim. But even right now, to me, it is still the greatest hope on earth, and it's because of your commitment, Steve, the commitment of folks like yourself, who even in these darkest times, even in this darkest hour, I suppose it could get darker, you still have the faith. You're keeping the faith, and that's what it's all about. When I tell this story from time to time, I had the chance to travel with Obama to Cuba when he was trying to get diplomatic relations going again with Cuba, and I had a chance to ask Raul Castro a question, and you know, I was thinking to myself, well, what do I ask him? Should there was only one thought on my mind, and that was to ask about that country's practice of jailing political prisoners. And Raul Castro, he pulled the translator headphones off his head when I asked this question. He couldn't believe what he was hearing, and he said, dame la lista, give me the list of the political." And he knew damn well who the political prisoners were in that country. He had a hand in jailing those people. And the thing that I cannot understand, I cannot fathom about the current Secretary of State is how you could, for one moment, be a part of an administration that would turn your backs against to the people who are on the front lines of the cause of our time, the cause of the ages, the cause of democracy. And there's a part of me that thinks that Marco is going to come to his senses, and maybe before the end of this year, he's going to get out of there. He's going to bail. And maybe I'm being too nice about this, Steve, and maybe you're hitting the nail on the head here. But as a fellow Cuban-American, it's just goddamn disappointing to see this
Well,
happening right now, because defeating the Russians in Ukraine is as critical to what is happening right now as anything else on this planet at this moment. It's that
if
it's
you,
that it's that vital.
when I think about in my life, and my parents are actually in the room next door. They're visiting. They're pushing 80.
Wow.
Um, the first refugee I met was a guy who worked with my dad, and it was Fanny and Gus, and they were Cuban refugees. And I remember the first crush I had was on Fanny and Gus's daughter. Right, it was a little bit older than I was. But when you think about Cubans in America, is that I never ever met a Cuban who was against liberty
Right.
ever, because every Cuban in America was for liberty, but
Yeah.
that skews the view because not every Cuban is for liberty. Otherwise, there wouldn't be Castro controlled Cuba. And
Correct.
so there are Cubans who have served the cause of tyranny. It's just unusual in America to have ever seen one. It's like seeing a polar bear in Central Park walking around.
Yeah.
The genus just doesn't exist here. It's out of place. So it is so despicable and so contrary to the contributions of an amazing cohort of Americans, which are the Cubans that have built lives and economies and enormous contributions to the United
Yeah.
States since arriving in the country fleeing political persecution in 1959. And to see the son of a Cuban immigrant asserting the Russian propaganda position
Yeah.
to the Polish foreign minister
I
is an astonishment, but you
yeah.
have to recognize, and here's the thing, the man who interrogated Adolf Eichmann was named Abner Less. He was a German Jew, Israeli police captain whose family was lost in the Holocaust. He lied about it, but he was the interrogator. If
Yeah.
you read the Les Eichmann interrogations, they're a master class in psychology. But 20 years after Eichmann's dead, Les has never talked about it. He's asked a question. Any takeaways from the experience? And he goes, yes. So a lot of people talk a lot of bullshit about a lot of things in
Yeah.
politics and media and journalism and have no idea. So, you know what? Yeah, I do want to know what the takeaway of the guy was who sat across from Adolf Eichmann for 275 hours and interrogated him.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
what he said was, it made me understand and put at the center my faith in democracy. Because there are Adolf Eichmanns all around us,
Yeah.
everywhere. They are latent in a democracy, but they become deadly in a dictatorship of the left or the right. And the truth of the matter is, and I'm not a smart enough guy to be able to tell you why. I'm not a smart enough person to be able to comprehend these forces and where they bubble up from. I just know
Yeah.
that I see a gleam in the eye, that my fluency in history instructs me is not a new gleam.
Yeah.
And there is a virus and Ebola that rises up and creates a compulsion for some to want to wreck and
Yeah.
burn. And there is not a constituency right now of millions in favor of this. That must
Yeah.
be severed from any intellectual construct around the dynamics of this moment, which is that
Yeah.
the Trump voter supports this. This is being executed by a few thousand people in Washington, D.C., around
Yeah.
Donald Trump, some of the richest people in the world. And what we are seeing is a profound crisis of indifference
Yeah.
in our civil society. But here's the news: the strength of the country comes from the core of its middle class, from its ordinary people,
Yeah.
not from its CEOs, not from the people who give each other certificates and participation trophies for being really fucking rich at Davos.
Yeah.
It comes from America's people.
Love it.
And so this moment of great contestation comes in an epic year of celebration and anniversary. When we talk about Mark Kelly,
Yeah.
he is one of the finest men that has ever put on the uniform of an institution that will turn 250 years old. The United States Navy,
That's it.
famous around the world.
Yeah. Yeah.
This year, beginning next month, we will celebrate an instant the shot heard round the world that ruptured history, that divided it in half, that
Yeah.
broke it into two. The shot heard round the world at Lexington and Concord, the beginning of the American Revolution. A few
Yeah.
days later, 250 years ago, George Washington, the Virginian, takes command.
Yeah.
250 years ago, the Battle of Bunker Hill.
Yeah.
250 years ago, the Congress decrees the formation from amongst the colonies a continental army of the whole. The
Yeah.
United States Army is born. And then,
Yeah.
in the need of the moment, the United States Marine Corps is born.
Yeah.
All of this is the preface to what happens next July 4th.
Yeah.
The most important moment since the birth of Jesus Christ and Muhammad in world history, the inception of the United States of America.
Yeah.
And so Donald Trump is a hustler and a con and a criminal who we elected president
Yeah.
because of the failure of a political party to offer anything better and to stop the madness. They
Yeah.
faced the threat with the politics of joy and Brett Summer and
Yeah.
the gaslighting about a senile 82-year-old man who was propped up by his wife and 6 or 7 staffers in one of the
Yeah.
most dishonest and outrageous lies ever told by an American administration. And the
Yeah.
fruit of all of that dishonesty
Yeah.
is this outrageous crisis
Yeah.
that we, the American people, will put down, put to bed, move on from, and pray to God learn a lesson from, because when we get to the end of this,
Yeah.
every American president, wherever they go, will be rolling with a new humility and an apology at the front of every fucking speech for the next 50 years. But until then, let us stop this madness.
Yeah. Well said. Well said, Steve. I think we should stop it right there, Steve. Great conversation. Always, I could just kick back and crack open a cold one and listen to you just go. I really appreciate it. And I've been kicking around this idea of doing a town hall because there are so many of these gutless cowards out there that won't do it. Maybe you and I should do one, and we'll
I'd be happy to do it
figure out a place to do
anytime.
it.
And I'm like, can I just
Yeah.
say one last thing? You know, we
Yeah.
got we
Yeah.
got nearly what we got. We got almost 9,000 people on here
Yeah.
in the middle of the afternoon. Many more people see it. Listen, I'm not trying to be angry with anyone, but I want to
Yeah.
say something to you. I'm begging all of you.
Yeah.
Stop treating the most powerful people in the world, like Joe Biden and the President of the United States, like they're Taylor Swift, and you're a
Yeah.
13-year-old kid. Like you're a fan, like they can do no wrong,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
A terrible wrong was done here. I'm
Yeah.
saying Joe Biden delivered this country through his profound selfishness to Donald Trump. If you
I
can't
know.
see that, if
I
you
know.
can't see that,
I think people see it now,
then you're
Steve.
so blind that
I
we
know.
won't be able to escape this. And God, I
Yeah.
pray that you all can see it. Because
Yeah.
unless and until you do, it's impossible to offer better. We're just the prisoner on one side of the vice by the Schumercrats and
Yeah.
MAGA on the other, and we'll get eaten by the stronger side because we're left undefended by the weak one. Good
Steve,
day, everyone.
I love you, man. And I think the last time you and I were talking, I said, let's put a pin in this conversation about what the hell happened in 2024. And I'm doing it again. But so the next
Yep.
time you and I do this, we start the conversation there because I feel like I need to let you get this off your chest. But that was, I mean, an amazing conversation. Steve Schmidt, everybody, great to see you, sir.
Good
And
to see you,
I'm
Jim,
so
always.
glad we talked about this, you know, Mark Kelly situation. What you've left us with a lot of things to think about. Thank you, Steve. Really appreciate it.
Take care, Jim.
And give my best to your folks next door. Tell them
You
thanks for
got
letting
it.
us take up some of their
You
time.
got it. You
Good to
got
see
it.
you, buddy.
You
All right,
bet.
see
My
you, man.
pleasure. Thank
Okay.
you.
That was Steve Schmidt, everybody. I'm going to try to bring in Tristan Snell, legal expert, former prosecutor. He and I have been playing a little phone tag, going back and forth, trying to set up a time to talk about this. And I want to piggyback off of my conversation with Steve Schmidt, if I can get Tristan up through this, as I call it, the Substack machine. I don't know if folks saw this earlier today, but I put it out there on Substack and a few other social places that the Hollywood Reporter had a big write up on Substack and how it's just going gangbusters right now. And so for folks who are tuning in and joining us here on Substack, I just absolutely appreciate everything. And there's Tristan right there.
Hey,
Tristan, good to
how's it
see you.
going?
I came to you a little
Good
late.
to see
Sorry
you.
about that. I appreciate
No
you
worries.
hanging. Sometimes when Schmidt and I get talking, you know, I seriously I want to get out the good stuff. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah,
I
yeah.
want to get the small batch bourbon out but I feel like you and I will have the same kind of conversation here. And I feel like Ted Koppel telling the affiliates we may go past the 1 hour allotment time that we've because you and I need to talk
Yeah.
about. I've been wanting to get a legal expert and somebody like yourself on, former prosecutor, if I'm not mistaken,
Yep.
because one of the questions that I have, and I think it's a question that a lot of viewers out there have, is yes, we know much of what is taking place, what Doge is doing, what Elon Musk is doing, what Donald Trump is doing is morally repugnant,
Hmm.
but is it legally repugnant? And it sounds
Yeah.
as though the courts, there are some judges, even Trump-appointed judges, Republican-appointed judges, saying not so fast.
Right.
What's been your assessment of this so far? And we talk about other stuff too, but your assessment of
Sure.
that, because that's been on
I
my mind.
mean, yeah, I mean, look, there's a couple of layers of this. One is that you've got the illegalities of what they've done allegedly, with numerous courts giving us a sneak preview into how they're going to be deciding these cases. What happens when you have sort of the early beginning of a case, especially under some of these laws, where what you're trying to get is to stop the federal action more than it is to actually recover money. But even in a lot of different cases, you can get either a temporary restraining order or you can get an injunction and a preliminary injunction, it's called. And
Yeah,
in either of those situations, the legal standard that the court is applying is among other things, is there going to be some likelihood of success on the merits by the plaintiffs? That's one of the bars that the plaintiffs have to clear in order to get a restraining order or an injunction. The judges that have been issuing these decisions, and you're right, they have been both Republican as well as Democratic appointed judges, a lot of them in the District of Columbia. That's where a lot
mm-hmm.
of these cases are being filed, as a federal court
Yeah,
in DC, but a number of them are in other district courts around the country, Seattle, Rhode Island, and so forth. When the judges are issuing these decisions, they're in effect saying, I'm taking a sneak peek at this, and it looks like the plaintiffs have a fighting chance. So
mm.
we're getting some early indications that that yes, there were illegalities committed here. Now, those aren't criminal illegalities in most of these situations, at least not yet,
Right.
because we're talking about things like the Administrative Procedure Act, which we could get into at greater length. But it's probably the most, what I keep saying is it's the most important federal law that most people haven't heard of.
Yeah,
That it actually regulates what these agencies can and cannot do. You can't just go fire hundreds or thousands of people.
right.
You can't shut down an entire program without having fact-based, policy-based reasons behind it. You can't do it just because you said so. That
Yeah,
doesn't work. One of the standards under the APA is that you can't do things that are arbitrary and capricious, and
mm.
that's one of for those of us who care about democracy and our republic and the rule of law. That is one of our best weapons to stop a lot of these excesses from occurring.
Yeah. And Congress controls the purse.
Right,
No matter what Donald Trump thinks, he can't just go
right.
willy nilly and just
No,
take a Elon Musk chainsaw to anything that he sees in his sight. And I've been particularly worried about the folks over at USAID. I talked with this was a private discussion that I had at an event I was at recently. Somebody who's fairly high up in USAID, and she was telling me about just how people are absolutely petrified there. Some of these folks have been
right.
stranded in far-flung places. They're doing the work of the United States, doing soft power, spreading the good word that this country can go into other parts of the world and do good things. And this is something that I saw today. I mean, ProPublica reported this, and Rolling Stone picked it up, that a new memo from somebody high up in USAID, it first surfaced by ProPublica, designates Tuesday as a, quote, clearing event with the agency's skeleton staff of essential personnel instructed to join in an act of mass document destruction. This memo from
Oh,
this acting executive secretary at USAID calls for purging of, quote, our classified safes and personnel documents at the USAID longtime headquarters, the Ronald Reagan Building in Washington, D.C. This is in a Rolling Stone article. And one of the quotes from this person says, shred as many documents first and reserve the burn bags for when the shredder becomes unavailable or needs a break. I'm just reading from Rolling
wow.
Stone, which was quoting ProPublica. Some of this sounds like they're trying to go so fast. They know what they're doing is legally questionable, so they go
Correct.
fast.
That's right. That is exactly right. Like you're
Yeah.
only, if you are turning on the shredder so much that you're worried about it needing a break because it's smoke starting to come out of it,
Right. Yeah.
right? I mean, for those of us who are old enough to remember the Iran-Contra affair,
Yeah.
do you remember this with Oliver North?
Oh,
And I'm
sure.
gonna forget what was the name of
I'm old
his
enough.
assistant. He had an
Fawn
assistant,
Hall.
Fawn Hall. Fawn Hall, and she was testifying that she was
She went to my
shredding
high
so
school,
much.
a little bit older than me, but she went to my high school in Annandale, Virginia, I believe.
There you
I
go.
think I'm correct on that. But anyway, I
But
digress.
I remember this as a kid that she was testifying and she was talking about shredding documents late into the night to cover up
That's
what
right.
they had done. I remember this. But if you're doing that, that's a pretty clear sign that you know you've done something wrong. That's that like
And they're
signs that
talking
you
burn
know you've been
bags.
right.
We're
If
not
you're
even
doing
100
that,
days in.
we're not even 100 days. I mean, yeah, we're not. We're still in the first 100 days, and we're already talking burn bags. So they're committing these things. So that's kind of layer one is the illegalities. But then layer
Yeah.
two, and this is where this starts to come in, is that then you can have situations where the cover up's going to be worse than the crime, right? Are they actually going to be breaking criminal statutes at some point with some of the things that they're doing? If they are taking documents and getting them out of federal custody and into private servers, have they broken federal criminal laws by doing so? If they're taking that data that they've had access to and using it for private purposes or private gain, that's
Yeah.
definitely a criminal problem. If they are wantonly destroying documents that they're not
Yeah.
supposed to be destroying, my bet is, I'm not an expert on this, but I bet you that there are criminal statutes that are implicated there. And then
Mm.
this is key. Government officials have some amount of limited immunity from liability, but only when they're acting within the scope of their official duties. So as soon
Yeah.
as they're doing something that's outside the scope of their job, and guess what? Newsflash, burn bags are probably not part of your job. They're just not. I'm just going to go out on
I
a
don't know.
limb
Where do
here.
you go buy a burn bag? I was just thinking this, is that at Home Depot? Do you get the burn bag at
Yeah,
the Home Depot?
I don't know where you get those. That's a good question. Yeah, I'll have to go Google sort of like how to crime and like figure this out because it's
Yeah,
actually
but
not
for
the
as a
side
good
of the ball I'm
prosecutor,
usually on. I'm not usually on that side of the ball, Jim. I don't know.
as a good prosecutor, that would be part of the discovery, the Google searches or the Amazon
Wh-
searches for burn bags,
right?
do they come in a
Yeah,
quantity of
exactly.
10,
Right, exactly. Yeah, you Costco, you can buy them in bulk, probably, right? So, I don't know where you get this
Yeah.
stuff from, but then you've got it. Yeah, other things like the servers. If they're bringing this data and getting it out of sort of the federal servers and using it for any kind of private gain, or they're privately storing it, that's also
Yeah.
outside of the scope of their official duties. So that's a whole other layer that we're not even thinking of yet.
Yeah.
Now, of course, DOJ is not going to be prosecuting any of these people, obviously.
True. True.
But the thing is, the statute of limitations on some of these things could end up running a ways. And so for these
Yeah.
folks that are, they're just like, I was just following orders, and they're like actually doing these things, they've got to remember that they might actually face justice on this 5 years from now.
That's
The
right.
things
That's
they're
right.
doing today, they could be civilly liable at any time here, and they could be criminally liable for after this term is over. So
Uh,
there's a number of layers here. There's being able to
yeah.
stop them for being arbitrary and capricious, and then there are whether some of these things that they're doing could expose people to civil liability, criminal liability, or if they're attorneys, it could expose them to disbarment.
Yeah, I mean, if the thought running through your mind is that, well, the excuse I'll give someday is I was just following orders.
It
I
doesn't
just
work.
want to right now. I just want to stop you in your tracks and just say you need to be thinking about your life choices here. If you're working for
Right.
Donald Trump and your excuse later on in life is going to be I was just following, I'm just saying that may not work out for you.
It may
Um,
not work.
but let me
It
ask you this.
generally, yeah, yeah.
No, I was going to ask you that. I one of the questions that I have is about the legality of Doge as an instant. We don't know what it is. Is it
Zero.
an agency? And
Yeah.
Tristan, if you could talk a little bit about the other night at the speech when Trump said Elon Musk is the head of Doge, which contradicted what they had been saying in court that Elon Musk is
Yes.
not the head of Doge. And then a couple of days later, after Trump said that, they were again, Trump was telling his cabinet secretaries, "Well, you're in charge of who's fired and who's not." It sounds as though they're on very shaky ground legally.
Incredibly so.
Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah,
Yes, so there are a number of lawsuits about this already, and they are moving forward, slowly but surely. And then it has come up in a lot of these other cases in which Doge, and I insist on using scare quotes whenever I say the word, in which Doge is actually implicated. Uh, it has not been set up in a way that is legally appropriate. There's just really no two ways
yeah,
about it. They knew they weren't going to be able to set it up and actually create something that would have the power that they wanted it to have by getting it as a true department created by Congress. Generally speaking, if you're talking about a new department, that's usually something that Congress ends up needing to create and then appropriate funds for. So they did a sneaky sleight of hand by taking something called the US Digital Service that already existed, that was a small unit of technologists. It was actually created by the Obama administration in the wake of the debacle around the healthcare.gov rollout to basically
yeah.
fix healthcare.gov and a whole bunch of other websites and things throughout the federal government. And they actually made a lot of progress on that. But they were like, great, we're going to use that, change the name, pack it full of a bunch of our cronies and minions, and then use it to basically be a SWAT team to break
Yeah,
down all the doors all around the federal government. The thing is that, like,
yeah,
you literally are taking something that had legal authority to make a website better, and then you're using it to shut down entire parts of the federal government. They're acting outside the authority
mm,
that they ever had. Like, you can't just be like, oh, we're going to take the lawn care service for the White House and we're going to use it to put in a bunch of brown shirts to start beating up people in the street. Like,
yeah.
you can't just take a thing and then change its thing and then roll it back out there. Like, that
Right.
legally it doesn't work. So,
Yeah.
in my view, without being an administrative law expert, because these areas of law get
Sure.
very specialized. However, I've been reading up on this and talking to very smart people who help me understand these things. My take on this is that we're going to see judges find that Doge has been acting well outside of its legal authority, and that thereby many, if not most, of the things that it's been doing are null and void. If they
Yeah.
wanted to change the color of a button on a federal website, that was in their purview. Pretty much everything
Right.
else was not.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If you want to change the drapes of the Department of Education, that's one thing. Tearing the whole damn thing down is quite another.
You
Yeah.
can't do that. Yeah.
Yeah.
This was to design to, like, oh, did it make it easier to check out
Yeah.
or did it make it easier to actually go find your healthcare plan? Like,
Yeah.
that's what their job was. And most of the
Yeah.
people who did that work have
Yeah.
quit because they didn't want to be part of. We saw the headline from a few weeks ago that, like, Doge, 21 people resigned. It was the people
Yeah.
that were there as part of the U.S. Digital Service that kind of got dragged into this. And then a
Yeah.
lot of them are just saying, like, I'm not helping you anymore. I'm not gonna be there while you tear apart all of these agencies. I'm not participating.
Yeah. And, not to jump around to a different subject, but one of the things that comes up often on my show, and this is an area where I think you can comment with a lot of authority because I see the book over your shoulder taking down Trump, is
There's that.
what your assessment is of Merrick Garland, the job he did as Attorney General.
Ooh.
I know when you go to cocktail, I see you leaning back in your chair.
Yeah.
Your assessment of where we would be right now had Merrick Garland acted 6 months sooner, a year sooner,
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I mean,
what would the world
sadly,
look like?
yeah,
Am
sadly,
I
we're
am
going to
I
be
am I
fight.
am I opening up Pandora's box here and like
Yeah, I
this
don't,
is going to become
in my
a TED
props back
talk?
here, I don't have a Pandora's box.
Yeah,
I could get the hourglass so that I can keep myself to a limit. But I'll try to say
no,
this.
yeah,
You hit the nail right on the head, Jim.
yeah.
Like if they had, and here's the thing,
And I
it's
hate
not just,
trashing him. I hate that
I don't want to,
respected
but at the
public
same time,
servant. Yeah, yeah,
yeah, I mean, he did a look. He had a long and storied career as a prosecutor. Unfortunately, I
yeah,
don't think that we're going to look upon his reign as Attorney General as being his finest hour. Like
yeah,
he did a lot of great things. He helped win the Oklahoma City bombing case. He helped win
yeah,
the Olympic Park bombing case in Atlanta. Like he was a very very highly respected prosecutor for many years, and I'll always respect him for that. I don't think that they moved quickly enough. I think they acted with a lot of sort of like excessive timidity and caution. They were being a little too careful, too wary of looking too political. Now, his hands may have been tied. It may have been folks at the White House who tied Garland's hands. We may
right.
find out. That might be like a Bob Woodward book at some point. We find out exactly how that went down.
Yep,
But what we know at the moment is that, this did get reported on. I remember there was a Washington Post piece about this. That there were discussions within the FBI and DOJ about going after the political suspects regarding January 6th in 2021, right?
yeah,
To go as opposed to just going after the Proud Boys and those folks, the boots on the ground guys, the ones who actually assaulted Capitol police officers and
yeah,
ransacked the Capitol, going after the suits, not just the boots. But the word from higher ups was no, we're not doing that. It came up, it was
yeah.
proposed, it was pitched, and it was stopped, and it was basically it continued to be
That's the
tabled.
story. You're right. That
That's the story.
if we can ever get to that heart of the issue, and perhaps there's going to be a great deal of resistance, different kind of resistance, ever getting to that sort of truth.
Right.
The American people deserve to know that part of the
We deserve
story.
to know what happened,
We
because the
deserve to
truth of
know
it
what happened.
is that the investigation into Donald Trump's role and his inner circle's role with regard to January 6th should have begun on the afternoon of January 20th, 2021. It literally should have been the very first thing that
That's
they
right.
did. Okay, maybe Garland wasn't there yet, but like whenever he first
Yeah.
stepped into Main Justice in February of that year, literally he should have called a meeting of his senior staff and been like, we're doing this, we're doing this, we're doing this. They should have named a special counsel that day. It should have been
Yeah.
immediately. And the American people would have applauded,
Yes.
including a lot of
Yes.
Republicans, because we forget the overwhelming, like, the overwhelming feeling among the American people at that point was that everybody who had something to do with that needed to be investigated and needed to be held accountable and brought to justice.
Yeah.
People would have
Well,
been okay with it. And
uh,
instead, they blinked, they didn't do it, and we didn't see Jack Smith get appointed until the very end of 2022,
yeah.
after the House had completed its investigation. And I still maintain, I said this in my book, that if the House investigation had never happened, with all of us, the people agitating for it to happen, was
Yeah.
why the House leadership greenlit it, because there was so much feeling out there among the people that something needed to be done. If the House Committee on J6 had never happened, I don't know that Jack Smith would have ever happened at all.
Wow.
I'm
Yeah.
sure it
No,
would have.
you're absolutely right about that. And folks who forget, I mean, because there's so much that has happened, we forget things. I mean, Donald Trump announced his candidacy shortly right after
It was right
the
after that.
launching of the
Right.
Jack Smith
That's right.
investigation, and he did he did it because he knew his goose was probably cooked, and he had to
If he didn't
immediately
win,
start
he
throwing
had to.
sand into the gears.
Right. That's right. And he wanted to create the optics of, you are coming for a candidate. It was all this whole
Yes.
idea of it being political retribution. They were not probably ready to actually put that announcement out there yet. It was the earliest that anybody has ever announced, except for fringe
Yeah.
candidates. It was, yeah, it was. We do forget that. That's a great point.
Yeah. Well, Tristan, let's keep doing this. Let's keep the
Yep,
conversation going.
absolutely.
As I warned the affiliates out there, we were running over our allotted time, but it was well worth it. When
Yep.
Steve Schmidt gets going, it's sort of like you can just
Oh
you
no,
put
you
quarters
got
in
to
him.
you
He'll
got to
just
keep
keep going.
going. You
He's
just got to
just
keep
he's a
going with him.
master at these kinds of long
Yeah,
form conversations. But I really appreciate your time as well. So thanks for hanging in there.
absolutely,
And great stuff. Let's do this again and let's talk soon.
absolutely. Let's do it again sometime soon. Thanks, Jim.
Thanks, Tristan. And Tristan's on Substack as well.
Yep.
He's written a book that's over his shoulder there. I mean, follow Tristan. The commentary he puts out there, I think, is really spot on. Tristan, great to talk to you. Thanks a lot.
Likewise, Jim. Thank
All
you.
right, take care. That was Tristan Snell, everybody, and he's a great example of what I've been trying to say to a lot of folks which is just have some patience with me. There there are folks who I want to collaborate with me, and I want to collaborate with them. And what I've been saying lately is I just watched this movie Mickey 17, where they this guy Mickey, played by Robert Pattinson, he makes himself what they call an expendable in this sci-fi movie that just came out, directed by the guy who directed Parasite. And Mickey gets killed, but they have a human printer on the spaceship, and they just print out a new Mickey every every time he gets. And so there's sometimes I wish that I had one of these machines where I could just print more of myself, so I could do multiple Substacks a day and do all of the other stuff that's out there. And I wish I could, have all of the folks on who have been saying, "Hey, love to do a collaboration." Please just know I'm working on it. The town hall idea, I'm working on it. I would love to do that. I'd love to continue to contribute as much as I possibly can. I'm just a washed up newscaster here. I'm just kidding. Just being a little self-deprecating. But one of the things that I'm so grateful for, and it was on my mind today because this Hollywood Reporter story came out about how well Substack is doing. My hat is off to the people here at Substack for the great job that they've done. You have people that are coming on this platform. Look we have 10,000 viewers right now. I feel a little hesitant to hit the end button on the Substack machine because we've gotten so many folks on board this afternoon. I hate everybody to go home, but my goodness, this has been going on for like an hour and 20 minutes now. But please, everybody know, I don't say this enough. I want to say it right now. I am so grateful to all of you for everybody who's been watching this little show get off the ground, building the plane mid-flight. Let's keep doing it. I'll be back again tomorrow. Got some other fun stuff in store for later on in the week. Guys, thanks very much for tuning in. Still reporting. And I'll say where I'm not in Washington right now, but I will say later in the week where I was. I don't always like to disclose my movements in detail, but still reporting. I'm Jim Acosta. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Really appreciate it. See you next time.